Tiara Adebayo, the only daughter of a wealthy and respected Nigerian entrepreneur, Mr. Adebayo, lived a life of luxury and privilege. Her father, a successful businessman, often traveled internationally for work, leaving Tiara in the hands of her cousin, Martins, who was always charming and seemed to have a close bond with the family. Martins, in his early 30s, had the charisma to win over anyone, but there was always a certain air of mystery about him. Tiara, still in her early 20s, never questioned her father's decision to leave her in Martins's care. After all, he had grown up with the family and was considered a trustworthy figure by all. As the weeks passed, Tiara and Martins became more accustomed to each other's company. She began to see him not just as a cousin, but as a confidant and protector, someone who could fill the void left by her father's frequent absences. There was something magnetic about Martins, something Tiara couldn't quite put her finger on. Though she knew he harbored secrets, she chose to turn a blind eye to them, convincing herself that he meant no harm. However, unbeknownst to Tiara, Martins had feelings for her that went beyond family affection. Despite the differences in their ages, Tiara and Martins found themselves spending more time together. They shared quiet dinners, conversations about Tiara's ambitions, and even explored the city together. Martins always knew how to make her feel special. He was attentive to her needs and always knew just the right thing to say. Tiara began to feel a connection with him she hadn't felt with anyone before. It wasn't romantic, at least not at first, but the line between family affection and something more intimate started to blur. Martins's attraction to Tiara grew stronger, and he found it harder to hide his feelings. He was careful, though, knowing that acting on his desires could jeopardize everything he had worked so hard for. But he couldn't help himself. Tiara, young and naive, did not recognize the subtle signs of his interest. She thought of him only as a family member, someone she could trust without reservation. However, the dynamics between them were slowly shifting, and what seemed like a harmless relationship was heading toward dangerous waters. One evening, after an emotional conversation about her father's absence and the loneliness Tiara often felt, Martins made a move. He pulled her closer, touching her arm gently, his breath warm against her skin. It was a tender gesture, but one that lingered too long, sending a ripple of uncertainty through Tiara. She didn't pull away, but something in her told her that this was not how family members should behave. Still, she brushed off the feeling, thinking it was just the emotional intimacy of the moment. Over the next few weeks, their bond deepened, and the lines between affection and desire grew even more blurred. One night, they found themselves alone in the family estate. The air was thick with tension, and before Tiara could fully comprehend what was happening, Martins kissed her. It was unexpected and confusing. Tiara pulled back, her heart racing, but she said nothing, her mind spinning. She had never imagined something like this could happen, especially not with someone she had always considered family. But the kiss left an undeniable mark on her. Their lips met again, this time with more urgency, and they kissed deeply, caught in a whirlwind of emotions that neither of them could stop. The makeout session was intense, passionate, and full of longing, leaving both of them breathless. When they finally pulled away, Tiara's pulse raced, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them, something that could never be undone. Weeks after the kiss, Tiara realized something was amiss. Her body was changing in ways she couldn't explain. Anxiety began to set in, and she started to feel nauseous and fatigued more often than usual. A trip to the doctor confirmed what she feared: she was pregnant. The shock left her paralyzed. Her mind raced with questions. How could this happen? What would she do? The weight of the secret pressed heavily on her chest, and she couldn't bring herself to tell anyone, not even Martins. She needed time to process everything. Her father, Mr. Adebayo, was due to return soon, and Tiara knew she couldn't hide this from him. The thought of telling him filled her with dread. She couldn't bear the idea of disappointing him, of tarnishing the family name. The Adebayo legacy had always been pristine, a symbol of success and respect. But now, the fear of public disgrace loomed large, and Tiara felt trapped. She couldn't undo what had been done, but she had to figure out a way to deal with the consequences, and no matter how painful. When Tiara finally gathered the courage to tell her father, the confrontation was explosive. Mr. Adebayo, ever composed and measured, was visibly shaken by the news. He couldn't understand how this could have happened. His own daughter, pregnant by her cousin. The shame was unbearable. The family's name, which had taken decades to build, was now tainted in an instant. Mr. Adebayo demanded to know everything, but Tiara, still in shock, could only explain what had happened between her and Martins in the most minimal terms. Martins, on the other hand, had disappeared. No one knew where he was, and his disappearance only added to the family's humiliation. Mr. Adebayo, consumed with rage and frustration, made it clear that he would not forgive Martins for this. The scandal spread like wildfire, and whispers of the Adebayo family's downfall reached even the most distant corners of society. Tiara was no longer seen as the innocent daughter of a successful entrepreneur. She was now the subject of ridicule, the girl who had been seduced by her own cousin. As news of Tiara's pregnancy spread, the media caught wind of the scandal, making it a public spectacle. The Adebayo family, once regarded with reverence and respect, became the subject of gossip columns and television talk shows. Tiara, now a pariah in the eyes of society, found herself hounded by reporters and curious onlookers wherever she went. The judgment was unrelenting. People who had once praised her father's achievements now whispered behind closed doors, questioning his ability to raise his daughter. In the midst of this, Tiara felt an overwhelming sense of shame. She couldn't face anyone, not even her old friends who had once admired her. She had become the symbol of a broken family, and she couldn't escape the heavy weight of public condemnation. Her father, once an influential figure, found his reputation slipping through his fingers. The family business began to suffer, with some long-standing partners pulling out due to the scandal. No matter how much Tiara wanted to hide, she was trapped in the relentless spotlight of public scrutiny. Martins's disappearance only fueled the fire. Tiara tried reaching out to him, but he was unreachable. He had seemingly vanished from the face of the earth. Mr. Adebayo, furious and feeling betrayed, began his own search, but there was no trace of Martins anywhere. His disappearance left a void that only added to the family's pain. Tiara couldn't help but feel betrayed. Martins, the person she had trusted most, had abandoned her when she needed him the most. As the days turned into weeks, Tiara's grief deepened. Not only was she dealing with the pregnancy, but now she had to carry the emotional weight of abandonment. She tried to contact family members who might know Martins's whereabouts, but no one seemed to have any answers. The guilt she felt for not seeing the signs of Martins's true intentions gnawed at her, and she began to question whether their entire relationship had been a lie. Was she just another pawn in his game? After months of traveling, Mr. Adebayo finally returned home. He had been abroad dealing with business matters, but the moment he stepped off the plane, he was confronted with the reality of his daughter's situation. Tiara had tried to shield him from the worst of the scandal, but now there was no escaping it. The once respected entrepreneur was now a man dealing with the fallout of his daughter's actions. The return of her father should have brought Tiara comfort, but instead, it made her feel even more isolated. Mr. Adebayo's disappointment was palpable. They spoke briefly, but the conversation was strained, filled with unsaid words and lingering tension. Tiara wanted to explain, to tell him everything, but the shame held her back. She felt that no matter what she said, her actions had already sealed her fate in her father's eyes. As Tiara's pregnancy progressed, she struggled with the weight of the secret she was carrying. The family had stopped asking about Martins, and Tiara was left to deal with the consequences alone. She had chosen not to tell anyone about the relationship that had led to her pregnancy. She couldn't bring herself to reveal the full truth. The thought of the shame and judgment that would come with it was too much to bear. But each day, the guilt grew heavier, and she wondered if she would ever be able to escape the shadow of what had happened. Her father, though visibly distant, still took care of her in his own way. He arranged for her to see doctors and ensured she had everything she needed for the pregnancy, but there was no emotional connection between them anymore. Tiara felt like a stranger in her own home, and every interaction with her father reminded her of the betrayal she had caused. The once loving father-daughter relationship had fractured beyond repair. The family, both immediate and extended, began to weigh in on the situation. Whispers about Tiara's pregnancy and the scandal surrounding Martins reached the ears of relatives who had previously been supportive. The Adebayo family, once the epitome of success, was now being scrutinized by everyone, from distant cousins to longtime business associates. Some relatives reached out to offer their support, but others distanced themselves, too embarrassed to be associated with such a disgrace. Tiara's relationship with her extended family became strained. Some blamed her for the scandal, while others sympathized with her, knowing how difficult the situation must have been. But the judgment was undeniable. Even though she tried to explain herself, there was no escaping the fact that her family's reputation was on the line, and Tiara had become the symbol of their fall from grace. Every family gathering was a painful reminder of how much things had changed. Tiara felt like an outsider, alienated from those she once loved. With her father's business at risk and the public still unforgiving, Tiara began to search for a way to redeem herself. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but she was determined to prove that she wasn't defined by her mistake. She decided to get involved in charity work and use her position to help others, hoping that some form of good could come from the scandal that had marred her life. Despite her efforts, however, Tiara couldn't escape the feeling that no matter how much she gave back, it wouldn't be enough to repair the damage done. The public still saw her as the girl who had disgraced her family. Her father's disapproval was the heaviest burden to bear. She often found herself asking whether it was too late to regain her place in society or whether the stain of her actions would forever haunt her.